What a pleasure to be with you all, and what a pleasure to follow my old friend Sylvia Earle, whose work I've been writing about for four decades, maybe five now. What a hero. Um, and what a hero in reminding us about how little we know about the oceans, how much there is still to explore, what great excitement remains. Um, let's let's um let's be real here. If we'd named this planet correctly, we wouldn't call it Earth, we'd call it ocean, because that's mostly what we've got here, three rocks out from the sun. It's what makes this planet so distinctive and so beautiful and so amazing, even if we don't pay as much attention to it as we should, since we live on land. Um, but of course, what we're doing right now to the world's oceans is a great danger and a great shame. Let me tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, I was in Australia doing some work with my colleagues who were trying to shut down giant coal mines and things there. And we had a day off, so we were near the Great Barrier Reef and we went out. In fact, the boat that had taken us out had taken out David Attenborough's crew 3 years before when he was filming Blue Planet. And probably some of you have seen that epic scene where they're out on the Great Barrier Reef on the night when coral spawns, the once a year explosion of fertility and fecundity, unlike almost anything else that happens on our planet. A picture of such enormous beauty. Well, we were in the same boat with the same captain. We followed the same GPS coordinates. We went, dropped anchor at exactly the same spot, put on our gear and dropped below the ocean. And instead of that enchanted, gorgeous corner of God's brain, instead it looked like I don't know, like a parking garage or something, just an endless expanse of gray. There were still some forms of coral covered with algae, those staghorns and things. But there wasn't any life, a few lonely fish floating about, looking kind of lost. And that was it. The Great Barrier Reef's the biggest living structure on planet Earth, but it's half as living as it was 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a signal for what's happening now and happening very fast to our oceans. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that even if we manage to meet the targets of the Paris Climate Accords, we'd lose 90 to 99% of our coral reefs, which is an extraordinary tragedy, but just the beginning. We're also losing the great kelp forests that fringe many of our continental land masses. And we're moving quick and fast in the direction of an ocean that doesn't work at all. The research a few years ago issued a method. They said that if we kept doing things the way we were doing them now, we'd end up with an ocean that they described as hot, sour, and breathless. And we know that that's possible because when we look back in Earth history, there are 3 or 4 other moments when volcanoes, not cars and factories, but volcanoes have released huge amounts of carbon dioxide and changed the atmosphere and changed the temperature. And that's what happened to the oceans. They are a refuge of sorts. It's harder to kill off species in the ocean because they have a certain amount of protection, but that didn't stop at during the end Permian, for instance, losing 90% of the species in the sea. So we live at a moment of great, great danger, but also great opportunity because we're coming to understand and love the oceans in a way that we haven't before. It wasn't but 4 or 5 decades ago when anyone except fishermen paid any attention to the oceans at all. In the 1950s in the United States, there was a remarkable series of books that became bestsellers that introduced America to the ocean. And they were by a woman named Rachel Carson, who later, in the 1960s, went on to write Silent Spring. and in effect found the modern environmental movement. But Rachel Carson's heart lay in the ocean. And the work that she began to open up that undersea vista was carried on by people like Jacques Cousteau and then people like Sylvia Earle and others who brought us face to face with the incredible diversity of life, with the extraordinary beauty, meaning, power of the ocean world around us. And now, young people above all else are rising up to their defense. That's what this remarkable movement against plastics has meant, for instance, around the planet. People saying, we don't want an ocean that has more weight of plastic than a fish in it, which is where we're headed at the moment. We don't want that, and we don't need that. And there are easy steps we can take to make sure we don't get there. Some of the other steps we're going to have to take are much harder because we also have to stop, probably even more importantly, stop the flow of carbon. That's what's acidifying the oceans, changing their chemistry, and that's what's raising their temperature, giving rise to these extraordinary marine heat waves that are decimating coral reefs and killing off other parts of the life beneath the waves. And that's very hard work. That means moving off of fossil fuels, and fossil fuels are an enormous industry with a lot of rich and powerful people at their defense. And that's why it's been so important to see people standing up. Above all, again, young people. Over the last 3 or 4 years, look what's happened. Look at how people have rallied to the side of people like Greta Thunberg, Sweden, as she's launched these climate strikes. Now, it's been a pleasure for me to get to know Greta over these last years, but even deeper pleasure to know that there are 10,000 Gretas scattered all across the planet doing extraordinary work in defense of the environment. In fact, so extraordinary among young people that sometimes I worry that, that too many adults will just take the deepest problems we face on this planet and offload them onto the shoulders of 14-year-olds. High school sophomores can't be expected to solve these problems, but it is a great service that they are raising them for us so that everybody now can begin to take part in the solutions. And the solutions come in many forms. Some of them are entrepreneurial and innovative, and they're new technologies. And a lot of them involve getting people together to build the kind of mass movements that are capable of changing our political and economic systems in ways that matter. That's hard work, but it's not impossible work. We look back on the 20th century at leaders like Gandhi or Dr. King, who showed us how to build big, nonviolent social movements that could demand and get change of the kind we needed. We need those movements now more than ever because there's nothing that we can do as individuals that will solve these problems. Yes, we should be living much more irresponsibly as individuals. Yes, as individuals, we can and must change our diets, change our habits, but that won't add up quickly enough if we're just doing it one by one. We're at a stage in these stories around climate and the oceans where we can no longer solve it just one electric car at a time. We're going to have to solve it one planet at a time. We're going to have to come together. And so the most important thing that an individual can do, and I know that this is one of the things you're really getting at today on World Ocean Day. The most important thing that an individual can do is not be quite so much an individual anymore. It's to join together with others in order to build those movements of a size and power large enough to take on those vested interests, large enough to change the world. We're capable of doing that, but it requires all of us coming together to make it happen. So I want to say so many thanks to the people who organized today, but to the people all over the world who are doing these things every day, building these movements, taking these steps, leading us forward. On we go.